The chair recognizes Mr. Driscoll of Braintree.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and through you to the members. I rise in favor of this important legislation. While an assistant district attorney, I handled a drug case, among others, that hinged on science. The defendant had been arrested for possession of cocaine, which was in a cellophane bag, and he also was arrested for possession of drug paraphernalia, which was a pipe with burnt residue in it. In the regular course of the prosecution, we sent the baggie and the pipe to the state crime lab to be examined to determine exactly what the illegal substance was. We believe that it was cocaine. When the results came back, the baggie came as baking soda. And the defense attorney, upon reading the report, moved to dismiss. As a prosecutor, I was not willing to give up that easily, and I decided to have the contents of the pipe and the residue tested, thinking surely that the defendant was not smoking baking soda. Well, the results came back from the lab, and indeed he was smoking baking soda, and he got his dismissal. Science had proven...
Chair apologizes to the gentleman at the microphone. For what purposes, gentlemen, rise? Gentleman's having difficulty hearing the speaker at the microphone. The chair again would request that all members subdue their conversation and pay due attention to the gentleman at the microphone. Chair recognizes Mr. Driscoll of Braintree.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I said, science had proven him not guilty. And while I'm sure he's happy to have his case dismissed, I'd venture to say that his dealer had some answering to do. The bill before this membership will expand the ability of law enforcement to seek justice on behalf of victims of crime by using science. The act to enhance the Massachusetts DNA database will expand the Commonwealth's database to include all convicted felons, whereas the current DNA database enacted in 1997, the state only collects DNA samples for violent offenders and sex offenders. What is DNA? As we all know, DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. Thank you. This is the molecule that's present in all living organisms and contains the information that determines all physical characteristics of an individual. It determines our hair color, our height, our eye color, among other characteristics. And the DNA in a person's blood is the same as the DNA in their hair, their saliva, and their skin cells. As a law enforcement tool, the use of DNA in prosecutions will lead to increased convictions and have the corollary effect of eliminating suspects from investigation. Additionally, DNA allows law enforcement the ability to identify individuals through their families because relatives sometimes have very similar DNA. This, of course, is not of large concern to those of us here in the public eye because, as Mark Twain said, why pay good money to have your family tree traced, go into politics and have your opponents do it for you? Prosecutors and detectives realize that each time a suspect commits a crime, he changes that environment and that environment changes him. A hair left behind on a baseball hat, a cigarette butt, sweat on the handle of a baseball bat, saliva on the stamp of a stalker's threatening letter, bite marks or fingernails will yield the microscopic keys to the criminal's identity. When law enforcement obtains DNA evidence from a crime scene, the DNA is compared against the state and federal databases. The best analogy to the DNA database is to fingerprint analysis. When using either DNA or a fingerprint, the evidence collected from the crime scene is compared to what's known as the known print. If enough of the identifying features are the same, the DNA or the fingerprint is determined to be a match. Our investigation, then, is only as good as our database. In order to be truly effective, known subjects must exist to be compared. There are three benefits, as I see it, to expanding the Massachusetts DNA database. One, more crimes will be solved. Two, more crimes will be prevented. And three, more innocent people will be exonerated. According to the data compiled by the Massachusetts District Attorneys Association, DNA exonerates the primary suspect in over 25% of FBI sexual assault investigations. Further, the present Massachusetts law permits DNA sampling of felons convicted of 33 violent offenses. But by the time a person is convicted of one of these designated offenses, he has already committed, on average, 34 other crimes. This is staggering statistics. Expanding the database would result in identifying criminals earlier in their careers and prevent future serious crime. From a raw data sample perspective, The expansion will mean the number of DNA samples in our database will increase from approximately 20,000 to 90,000. In the other 27 states that have adopted this measure, enhanced DNA databases have significantly increased the rate of DNA matches and subsequent criminal investigations and prosecutions. As we contemplate this legislation, I'm reminded, as I'm sure the members are, of the words of Chief Inspector Heat, the fictional police officer in Joseph Conrad's novel, The Secret Agent. He runs into a suspect in a London alleyway and says to him, quote, "Give it up. Whatever it is, give it up. You'll find we are too many for you." By endorsing this legislation, we will be sending criminals the clear message that we are too many for them, that we are working with our law enforcement officials to give them the tools to fight crime and protect our citizens. As an assistant district attorney assigned to the Sexual Assault, Domestic Violence, and Child Abuse Unit, I had the privilege of meeting some very brave people. The social workers and professionals who work in the area of child abuse and sexual assault, the police officers who investigate these crimes, but most of all, the victims who come forward and describe what had happened to them. DNA became an invaluable tool in the construction of our cases. I had the opportunity to be trained by the FBI and the Department of Justice in the detection, collection, and presentation of DNA evidence at trial. On many occasions, I obtained an order from a judge to take DNA evidence from a subject. I observed the collection, pre-trial, of samples from suspects involved with sexual assaults. I watched as a trained nurse drew the blood from the defendant and pulled the hair from their arms and their head, which is actually the best method of obtaining the hair evidence because the bulb contains more DNA material. It should also be noted that DNA does not just identify a suspect. It can place a known individual at a crime scene, a building, or in a room where the suspect claimed not to have been. It can refute a claim of self-defense, put a weapon in the suspect's hand. It can change a story from an alibi to one of consent in the issue of a sexual assault. In fact, one of my cases, this was the exact circumstance. The suspect, who claimed to be a lookout in a sexual assault, changed his story when the DNA revealed that he had a greater involvement than he was willing to admit. His DNA is now part of the state DNA database. As a Norfolk County Assistant District Attorney, I was impressed with the training of the officers and detectives who had embraced this new forensic technology but were frustrated by its limited application. My departments in the 5th Norfolk District, Braintree, Holbrook, and Randolph, are devoted officers and gifted officers who are serious about their profession and trained to handle this type of evidence and investigation. Time and again, I was impressed with their imagination and attention to detail in securing a crime scene and running an investigation. One famous literary detective, Sherlock Holmes, known for his thorough investigations, noted, quote, "They say that genius, in relation to his detective skills, is the infinite capacity for taking pains." And he noted further that this might not be a good definition, but it does apply to detective work. The work of collecting DNA evidence is detail work. It's detective work. This House has embraced technology and given leadership before. In a state that prides itself on its colleges and universities and high-tech industry, it is only right that we catch up to the technology curve as it applies to law enforcement. Joseph Wambar, in his book, The Choir Boys, said that there are 3 characteristics of a good police officer: common sense, a sense of humor, and a little compassion. And while these may be the characteristics of a good police officer, it is important for us as policymakers to provide the tools necessary to law enforcement to be a success. In my opinion, the greatest tool that we can give to our officers and prosecutors is a DNA database at least as comprehensive as 27 other states. Passage of this bill will be a valuable and important public safety improvement. For the above referenced reasons, Mr. Speaker, I hope that you'll join me in supporting this legislation, and when a vote is taken, I ask that it be taken by a call of the yeas and nays. Thank you.